Okay. Well, hey everybody. It's Thursday, the 24th of August. And this is Plutus PBL live coding. I want to thank Dan for sharing screen today. I had a little, I'm dealing with a few technical difficulties over here. So thanks for driving today. And right before we went live, Newman, you were sharing a little bit about, you compared the knowledge you're building to Swiss cheese. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. As we do, problem-based learning, as we figure out projects, we build up a experience and knowledge, and it's sort of Swiss cheese-like. It sort of has holes in it. There's like little pockets of things, and it makes me and my. Whoa. Oh, hey, Rahat, you're, yeah, this Swiss cheese is kind of, it's got little holes in it, and it makes me it makes me tentative. Like I don't trust my, knowledge and skill, and I don't take on projects, et cetera, et cetera. So one way to sort of fix that is to go through a course, and that's the beginning of our course here at the Plutus PBL. And one of the great things about sort of open resources is that there's a bunch out there, and so I discovered, actually Harsha brought it up to my attention, CS Computer Science 50, Introduction to Computer Science. That's a collaboration between Harvard and MIT, and they've been doing this forever, since 2008, 2010, but it's really well established now. And it's an introduction to computer science. So they do command line and basically programming, teaching us the C programming language, but all sorts of great Linux and insights into thinking like a computer scientist. Really, really great professors, all sorts of material, huge amount of resource. The discussion board, I checked the Discord, and it's got 17,000 online participants right now. Their website says that 5 million people have taken it or are taking it. It's free, it's open. I think that it would be a real important thing for anyone that has this feeling of Swiss cheese background knowledge. Yeah. So I encourage anyone, and I'm putting the link now into the Miro board.
That's really good. Yeah.
Thank you. I can even imagine that, those of us here might have a particular subset of that course, and maybe even like a guided tour of it being of value, so not necessarily for immediate action, but let's think in the weeks to come about how, what in particular we want to point people to. We could share like a couple of entry points at different strategic points in the course, just to show people how helpful that is. That's really cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Just to add to what you said, Human, when I was learning programming, like from the very beginning, I used to watch a lot of tutorials, like Udemy and so on.
Yeah.
And I think that the most value that I get was from me trying to solve a particular problem, then watching the guys explaining some complicated concepts that I didn't even heard before. So this is like the best way to learn. For me, I don't know. Maybe other people have other.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to add to what you said.
For sure. And then just the idea that there are tons of tutorials out there. So what is it that we can offer? And to be honest, it's this group of people that are, like the cohort, learning together and solving problems together, like finding projects and solving them, having a space where we, can hear each other's voice and see each other and develop a group dynamic. These to me are the real things that get me out of tutorial hell. I don't know if you've heard that term. tutorial hell, which is just you take a bunch of tutorials and they throw information at you and you kind of understand it, but it doesn't get activated or integrated such that you can really solve problems on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That's why I'm super stoked about this, about Gimbal Labs and just sort of this idea of a decentralized learning community. That we can build the classroom ourselves. This is sort of part of our foundational educational philosophy, is that we're taking over the classroom. The monkeys are in charge of the zoo.
The lunatics are in charge of the asylum.
Yeah, that's right.
Roberto, what do you think?
I was just going to say, I put a couple of websites on the chat. If you're looking for practice, I found Code Wars and Exorcism to be really good resources it's solving puzzles with code. There's like 1,000 different problems. There's also Lead Code. I didn't really like Lead Code. It's too, it seems like it's a different type of know-how, but Code Wars and Exorcism actually has even a mentorship component where you can ask questions and someone that is sort of an expert will try to help you figure out how to solve the problems. So it kind of pairs up really well with learning basic concepts like CS50, which is wonderful. It's really the approach they use. There's a reason why it's so popular, and it's because they really, really thought out how to combine some sort of very practical basic concepts with this teaching you C and teaching you command line. But I also recognize that practice makes perfect. So I would recommend those two. In my experience, this is what I know. Those two websites are wonderful to just get into the habit of solving problems with code, getting to the habit of thinking that way. It's sort of supposed to give you a mentality of step-by-step problem solving, breaking down problems into small pieces and working your way through puzzles, let's say. I really like them. It was really useful to me.
Cool. And wouldn't you imagine, and I know but wouldn't you imagine that like Gimbal Labs, like the community and the networks that we form here, the relationships that we form here, that like maybe we're like, hey, let's do some code wars problems, or there's like mentorship and like we can get through the sticky problems, because that was always the thing. I would get stuck on something and I was just like, oh, it's too hard, and it was just nameless, faceless, and my my body like gave up on it, whereas my brain was still like happy to go. I feel like those type of supports, like we could create.
I absolutely agree. When I learned to, I'm still learning, but when I started learning to code, it was completely online, and this like mob programming, just getting together in like Discord or wherever and just solving problems together. We used to do also like Anki cards together, learning concepts. It's 1,000 times more efficient than doing it on your own. You can just like be a lurker and kind of see others solve problems, or you can be the one that's leading the problem solving and you're just getting practice. Whatever, it's always better in a group, whatever, small or big. I find it helps me a lot to progress. You don't get stuck as much. It's less frustrating. You kind of help others out in whatever your strengths are, and others help you wherever they are better at whatever. So I would definitely suggest sort of getting together in groups and working through problems. It's just fun.
Yeah. It's just fun. I love it, man. It's freaking great to hear.
Everyone, let's all think about ways to establish these ideas, right? If you're seeing some experiment we could do with getting people together to go on like an exorcism side adventure. Gosh, that's a funny phrase to take out of context. But like, if there's any adventures like that you can imagine, let's really start bringing those to the table. And if you find yourself with a proposal to do something like that, that would be such a wonderful thing for us to figure out together. So yeah, we're not going to be lacking funds forever. And so as we have funds to bootstrap work like that, everybody is welcome to start bringing proposals, and let's see what we can make work.
Yeah, excellent. I'm ready to bootstrap some Cardano node. Yeah.
Nice. Piotr, do you have are you working on any particular problems right now?
Right now, I was actually working on the DMU jukebox application, because we are planning on selling, not selling, but we are gonna give away mixtapes that people can play on the jukebox. And me and Randall was working on it for the past few days. But yeah, no, not a particular problem. Although I do have some problems from Bonfire. I don't want to throw problems at you guys.
No, I mean, any of that could be really interesting. So if you've got ideas, that's always a place that we can look together. Newman, what was next on your list when you say bootstrapping the Cardano node?
I think once it's running, and because that's actually great sort of video from yesterday, installing from the executable. But once it's running, what are the things that we do with it? So maybe the basic commands of Cardano node, like getting it executed, perhaps even people sharing their scripts. I know that was one of the modules, later on is building a script to start it. So you can just do Cardano node start, and it would, it knows to grab, which I still don't do. I just copy it and paste it from a reference file. But then also some of the CLI commands, basic, some of the basic uses, which is just, it's just that module. I guess that would be 10 something. The 101 and 102.
Yeah. I think it's always valuable to review what Cardano CLI currently can do. Because sometimes, even as you go through the documentation of what it makes available, sometimes it can be surprising, oh, I never noticed that command.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody interested in looking at that for a little while? Just the built-in CLI docs, and see if there's anything that catches your attention.
Yeah, I'd love that.
What else might we cover today? What questions are folks bringing to the table?
I did have some.
A freewheeling Cardano CLI investigation can always lead to some unexpected places as well. So what do you say we jump into that? Is that cool?
That would be cool.
And Dan's got it ready. Can you go full screen on that terminal, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for driving today.
That's okay.
So as you've already shown here, right? Cardano CLI, you can include the dash help, but even if you just type Cardano CLI, you get you get this information. So if anybody ever forgets where to start, you can just type the names of these executables that we looked at installing yesterday. And you can see this list of options: address, stake address, key, transaction, stake pool, etc. So even just starting from here, what's on that list that people have questions about?
Looking. So which of the, zoom in for a moment if you could, Dan. I can also do that on Zoom. Here we go.
I can't zoom in much more than full screen.
True.
What node version are you using?
I'm on 8.0.0, I think. Hang on. Thought I had
You
it
can
up there.
type Cardano node dash version.
There we are.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. Thanks.
8.0.0.0,
8.0.0,
yeah.
yeah.
Has
As you'll
anybody,
notice, sorry, I was going to say, you'll notice the Git revision is incorrect on that. That was a fault at the time. I think they've now corrected it so that it does show you the correct revision when you now download the binaries.
And so that Git revision is like, is it a more specific version than the numbers there, like 8.0, 0.0?
Yeah.
What's the Git revision?
If you do it on yours, Newman, if you do the
Okay.
same command on yours, because you downloaded 8.1.2, was that right?
At something, yeah. I downloaded maybe a week or two, a month ago, maybe. Let me open it up.
Was it Faizan who downloaded the new one yesterday?
That's the one he did yesterday. Hey, Faizan, if you've
Yeah.
got your terminal open.
I am on my Windows, so I think I have to shift to the Ubuntu.
Mine's just loading in right now. Way to go, super fast computer. Hey, I heard that Europeans say minus version, which I think is cool. Oh, okay, here's mine. Mine's 8.1.2, and the git rev ends with 9767.
Yeah, it was a known issue on some of the earlier binaries that the Git revisions were wrong. I don't know why.
Yeah. What is the current of? Well, yeah, I've thought about it. I was like, now that I know how easy it is, I might just do it. To keep it up to date. How important is it to keep software up to date? I know that in Linux you can do the git-apt update or upgrade. Like, how important is it to keep all that stuff together?
it's never important until it suddenly is.
Yeah, right.
Like, so you can go a while without breaking changes in many cases. But when you see that term breaking changes, or when you see like a Cardano hard fork, what basically when there's a hard fork event and we enter a new era of Cardano, what that essentially does is it makes earlier versions of Cardano node now irrelevant. Right. And so they'll work up to that limit, but then past that, so that's how many people have been following the Sancho Net stuff as that started to roll out?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Good. Hands. Show of hands. Oh, man. Yeah, but
yeah.
but I guess it's the you know, from what it's the test net, the Catalyst test net, or some other governance stuff. I'm curious about it, but I don't, you know, just in the sort of summer of governance sort of theme.
Well, with that in mind, what if we take a look? There's this new line here on Dan's screen. It says governance. So what are the Cardano CLI governance commands?
What?
And this is a cool snapshot right now, because this is going to be changing right before our eyes over the next few months.
Yeah.
Oops. Oh. Silly computers decided.
Robots.
Yeah. CLI.
Governance commands. Okay. So how do you, so if you just type that in, what's going to happen? I have no idea.
See?
H. Okay.
Okay. So right now, these are the governance commands.
What? That's awesome. Create poll, answer poll, verify poll, create update proposal, create an update proposal, create a Genesis key delegation certificate, create an MRI, move instantaneous reward certificate. Huh. What is a mirror? Sounds fun.
Has anybody installed Node version 8.2 or above yet? These experimental versions?
I bet Faison does. Mine is 8.1. Oh, yeah, I wonder if my sorry to interrupt, but Dan's node is old. I wonder if it's different in mine. I'm gonna check.
And at the start of the Conway era, what we're going to see here is a new list of possibilities. That's really what SIP 1694 was all about, is what are the parameters of the new commands that are being added to this feature set. And so I actually just haven't had time, because I'm just back to work in the last few days. But on Cardano Node 8.2 and the Sancho testnet, you're going to be able to experiment with early versions of each of these new commands. I would love to look at that with everybody ASAP, if anybody's interested. Okay. Seb, what do you think?
About, I was gonna think that. Sorry.
So how would you explore that? Isn't there some documentation somewhere that like would have like, oh, okay, to run this verified poll, like here's some examples, and here's a walkthrough of some kind. I'm on docs.cardano.org.
Yeah, there's a website at, here's the web address.
That's one of the things that, oh, okay, Sancho.network, okay. It's one of the things that it's, and I've come to sort of expect it with the decentralized sort of mode, is that there's just like, it's very difficult to find the info. And I guess it's just until we get, the AIs online that it's just another step to just be able to query it. Because if I ask OpenAI right now, it'll say, 2021 is my limit.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, this stuff. Dan, open up this link right here from the chat. This actually shows some of the early documentation that we've got.
Let me find the chat. Where's it gone?
Oh, and I can also put it in the on the mirror board.
All right, here we go. Nope, it's not going to do it. Hang on.
I'll do it.
Let's get that chat out of the way. Okay. Right, we're there.
So check it out, right? Look at line or instruction 3, create the action file. Any of us who have played with Cardano CLI transaction build, the shape of this should look pretty familiar. But we've got a governance action right here. And so that's what it will look like. And we can test this right now if you have node version, what's the minimum requirement? 8.2.1-pre. It's a different set of configuration files with testnet magic 4, as you can see.
Oh,
Somewhere on here, right? So there's a Sancho net is the test network predating the Conway era going live, right? So you can see the Conway era tag. An early version of this is now running. And by moving through these docs, you can work through this.
it feels like a like another module, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and then the student learning target is I can start. Well, we already have a start a node. We already have. I'm looking at the tutorials there. Create keys and address. Create an action. Like I can create a governance action on the Voltaire network. Hello, that's a pretty cool student. That's a cool thing to know, be able to know how to do.
And this is why we want you to have this kind of access to Cardano CLI, because no matter what, there just don't yet exist front-end tools for these commands, right? So there's tooling that has to be built, and it's being built in real time to make all this stuff available, to have, for example, GraphQL queries that can give us relevant information to look at this data. But right now, this is what we've got. This is where it starts, right? In these early days, just understanding what kinds of new transactions we can build that have these actions, right? So create an action file, step 3. Step 5, now build a transaction. You can see where that constitution.action out file is used. And if you follow this tutorial locally, you can actually look at the contents. That's what step 4 says, right? Of what that action currently looks like. And so maybe you're already getting familiar with what datum looks like on chain, or what a redeemer has to look like when you use it in a transaction. Same thing here for governance. Yeah, Faizan, testnet magic 4, that's right. So the way this Cardano is built, right? So that you can have any number of test nets. And there's even ways to run test nets locally on your machine. You could make testnet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you could be the only node operator on it, just so you can kind of play around with how transactions work. And that's what, if you go like a bit deeper into development, you might find a moment where you want to do that, right? But then for new features rolling out globally, anybody who wants to is able to share, hey, here's the network configuration, here's the magic number we're going to use. You want to spin up a stake pool on this and participate in that test network. This is how you can do it.
This is really cool, man. Because in the recent past, the discussion was about the constitution, for example. We don't have a constitution, and you want to establish a constitution, but we don't have a constitution in Cardano. With this, you can create a constitution. You can try to create a constitution. This huge document about the democracy and the participation of the people. You can try with the system create your own constitution. That's the fascinating thing of the test nets. You can try things. It's really cool.
I've
what
spotted
about-
a new key.
Yeah.
What's a cold signing key?
That's a private key. Okay. But you basically, if you run a stake pool, what you're going to want is a set of keys that ideally have never been on a computer that's connected to any network. Okay. Now for regular transaction signing, sending a little bit of ADA here and there, this is obviously not a sustainable approach. But if you're running a stake pool and holding, probably tens of thousands of ADA, you're going to want to put the keys on a separate machine. Okay. And when you create a stake pool, it's more than just a single key pair. You actually have, this is the cold key pair is a set of keys that will never change. And they kind of identify your pool and you as the owner of it in the first place. But then there's a set of hot keys as well that rotate. And this is kind of how the heartbeat of the SPO network is kept. It's like every 70 something days or something that you have to rotate your hot keys basically as a way of showing that you're still in the game and participating in the network.
Oh.
There's different tutorials about stake pool setup, but also let's go back. If you want to go back to the terminal, we could just look at some of the commands that are available here, even if we don't go all the way into using it right now. And actually, this register a stake pool tutorial on this web page is probably helpful for that too.
I've lost my terminal window. Where has it gone? There it is.
Yeah, try Cardano CLI stake pool or stake dash pool. So not too many things, right? So create your registration or deregistration certificate, but try this with registration dash certificate on it, for example.
Okay.
Okay, so when you register a stake pool, here's all the information you've got to provide.
And I'm kind of curious about the test net. So we could create we can create a stake pool on any net, pre-prod, preview, mainnet, and it's the same. It's the same. It's just a different magic number.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. Different keys and different magic number, right?
Okay.
Well, you could use, right. There's nothing distinguishing keys between networks. Yeah, that's right. Basically, it's just the different magic number. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
How many computers do you need to run a stake pool?
2. If you want to do the whole thing locally, it's possible to emulate different nodes from different ports, and you can actually run a private network with multiple nodes running on a single computer. But certainly for mainnet, you need your operating block producing node and you need a relay node. And it's ideal if those are on different machines. It's
So
relative.
you could run a testnet node quite easily on a single computer without
You
doing
could,
too much harm.
yeah, as long as you get your
Okay.
ports right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Faizan, the system requirements are very different between mainnet and pre-prod because mainnet is a much bigger ledger than pre-prod. So it'll take up, some multiple of hard drive space. And I don't know right now if you must have more RAM to run on mainnet. But it certainly consumes more resources than testnet.
I think, unless I'm mistaken, I've seen somewhere they recommend 24 gig for mainnet nodes.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
It keeps increasing and it will continue to, right?
Oh, yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah. Oof. It's a lot.
I knew I should have got 32 gig in my computer.
That feeling of having enough like rarely lasts. You're like, oh, 16 gigs, man. Oh gosh. I remember getting 1 gig on my iMac in 2003 and thinking I was just like, oh, I'm like
We
muscle.
hit a gig.
Yeah,
So
hit a
true.
gig. 2 512 sticks. Oh man.
But
Yeah,
so
now you look at sorry, go on, James.
no, go ahead, Dan. It's okay.
No, I was just going to say now you look at an SSD drive and you think if it's less than a terabyte, it's not worth worrying about.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's like can't be much on there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about this documentation, like it goes so fast. It's a real problem. Like that was something that over the last couple weeks, and like just seeing this, like, oh, okay, this is the kind of like command line stuff, like just opening up the function and flag, -h, -h, flag H on the command. Like that's as close to source, I think, as we get, because I mean, who writes that document? I'm just like, how to keep all this documentation up to date. I'm switching over to sort of like learning. So if you want to learn about how to, that first available option there, stake pool verification key plus string, like where do you go to get it? I guess and somebody has to make that, and someone has to put it into a front end so that people can search it and get to it. And this has something to do with governance, because like, maybe we don't, like, I don't, yeah, there's
documentation should force everybody to question how much you actually want decentralization.
Yeah.
Because what we're going for is a decentralized distributed ecosystem. Okay, well, who pays somebody to write documentation in that ecosystem?
Yeah.
Then how quickly do we all want, a centralized place with canonical documentation?
Right.
And so it's a great question, and supporting that in the long run, I think, is the work of governance, right? Like,
yeah.
We talk about minimum viable governance. I'm of the opinion that a government should help run the essential work that nobody wants to do otherwise, or that you have to pay for, right? Documenting Cardano CLI, for example.
Right.
Now this documentation here, Cardano CLI is written in Rust. Okay, and Rust is a great tool for writing command line tools.
Why?
I know, what's the short answer to that? Why?
But I mean, does it have something to do with, like, do they make documentation easier in the context of this?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know. One way to say it is Rust, the Rust Hello World tutorials come with, learning how to write a command line tool. Whereas like JavaScript, that's not the thing you usually pick up for writing command line tools. But there's a better answer to your question. I'm not sure. But I know that, this documentation here, it's just this all had to be written. It just happens to be written in to an interface that presents it to us this way, right? But you could go into that code, and we know that this is still a great list of all these capabilities of Cardano CLI, for which the high level documentation, it can be hit or miss. But yeah, you can always go here and kind of hack away. And I think it's on us to keep making tutorials that illustrate this a step beyond just kind of the bland minimal documentation that we see here.
Right.
And so with that in mind, right, a stake pool operator PBL, I think, could be a powerful thing for us to do in the future. We just haven't had the resources to build it yet. But if people have interest and want to build up, say, a test net that Plutus PBL students can reliably use and break and experiment with, that's something we can look at.
Wait a minute, rewind. I was looking at Roberto's chat messages. Documentation is painful across all the board. Maybe we need a wiki style documentation with rewards from a treasury, like somehow to incentivize. Like, how do these giant useful wikis get established and start running? And so those who review the source could add their 2 cents and combined experience, like communicate. That's just, the promise of community knowledge management, like, and how to facilitate it without it running into, those sort of governance issues, like, oh, it's just me and my gang that have access to this, or you have to pay, or it's too expensive, it falls down, it gets out of date. I get so excited when I talk about this.
Yeah, this is what we intend to do, right? Building from what Plutus PBL is right now. As we discussed yesterday, keeping the course up to date is step one in showing how some treasury funds, ideally from Catalyst and eventually from a Cardano treasury, because we see this as a public good, can support people to the ongoing support of a knowledge base like the PPBL course, right? Now, other folks can then take that model. This is what Andamio is, right? Take that model of managing a treasury to create contribution to a knowledge base like this, okay? To make sure that it's ongoing. So we want to show that this model works for one knowledge base at a time, right? And as we show that it works, people can pick it up, and somebody here might be the person who starts the SPO PBL, right? And starts to construct that knowledge base and build up around it. All of the tools are available. They're currently running the PPBL course. So we'd like to help everybody here learn how to use them and figure out what needs to be running next.
Mm-hmm.
Once that happens, discoverability is still an issue, right? How do you make sure that somebody can find the knowledge they need reliably? They know this resource exists, but at the same time, without closing off other resources, right? This should be a positive sum game where there are different entry points to essential documentation. And if there was only one, that would close off the opportunity for other folks to contribute in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want to try to balance both.
For fear of over talking, I can't remember if it was on this one, but there is like the AI chat agents will tell you like your percentage that you talk on the call. And I hate over talking. But I do want to level set and sort of give some like very concrete experience with this. As Faizan and I were working through rebuilding the Cardano node and just getting it installed and doing whatnot, going back through our documentation and no fault, like one of the links was broken. They had moved, whoever, Cardano, I think it was a link to the, well, actually, there was the Cardano Foundation, cardano.org. There was a linked YouTube video that was following some documentation that was on maybe it was on a forum post or in somewhere else. What I'm saying is there's a huge ecosystem of all of this, and it reacts like it changes because it's changing all the time, and different versions, things come out, different sort of standard practice comes out. Like we use npm, and then we use yarn, and things are in a rightly so sort of adjusting. Anyway, this is all to say my experience with it at that level, like I don't know how to necessarily frame the problem, and I don't know at all about the solution to it, other than I'm seeing it now reflect like governance, that this and sort of the decentralized contribution. And it's something that I personally want to do. And I think that it can be something that a user without like augmentation, like not a super user, just a user, someone that needs the documentation and is trying to use it, can contribute, and thus decentralize, yeah. And just to throw it in there, it's probably a mindset, there's probably a mindset shift that needs to happen from someone will take care of this for me, someone will make the party and I just attend, versus kind of a more potlatch type of mindset. It was like, well, I go to the party, but I bring some stuff to the party, and I need to set up and I need to clean up, and I'm not the owner of the party, but I'm not the owner of the party. Okay.
Roberto.
Yeah, I agree with Newman and Roberto in the chat. I think the problem with Cardano is the incentives don't seem to be there. Like I think creating the Cardano Stack Exchange was a way of sort of fulfilling that role, and you can find information there, but it's difficult, and it fails to recognize that in other ecosystems like Stack Overflow and other stuff like that, you have complementary resources. You can even go to YouTube, mostly YouTube, and you can find Ethereum, for example, tutorials of any kind from different teachers. There's just a variety of different sources. It's not just one or two like it is now. So right now, everything is dispersed and no one's really aggregating in different ways, whether that's a course, whether that's just a YouTube tutorial. So I think it's a matter of incentives. Like the reason why people are so active in Stack Overflow is because the wider community sees you participating in Stack Overflow, and you can become its reputation, and it's a useful reputation. You are, when you get points in Stack Overflow, you are recognized as a whatever good experienced or knowledgeable programmer. But I don't know if that translates to Cardano Stack Exchange, where it's such a small community and such a specific knowledge set that you really are not going to get anything other than that, other than recognition from the Cardano community. Maybe that's not necessarily the end goal for someone that needs to spend time and effort in writing a good answer to different sorts of questions. Particularly because, as you said, Newman, the information is all over the place, and a lot of it is just outdated, really is. And
Yeah.
the ecosystem is changing so frequently that keeping up with that documentation just on the sake of, oh, we're a community, let's do it, it just doesn't seem to me like it's enough of an incentive. So we really need to think differently about the initiatives that we're creating in terms of education, I think, to promote that work, because it is work and it's going to need to be recognized and somehow rewarded if we want it to be done.
Right. And in our PBL here, in the Gimbal Labs, I did come across, they're like, hey, look, and maybe it was in a student learning target to go on and post things in those groups, Cardano Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, Cardano Forum. I think that's a part of building maybe possibly background knowledge, but also fit for service type of activity, where a user, to use that party analogy, it's just like, yeah, I'd like to bring something to the party, but I bring the casserole and I forget to wear my oven mitts and burn myself, or there's certain things that have to be in place, building background knowledge in order to contribute and be sustainable in that. And I think that's a part of our, building background knowledge part. It's just like, okay, and giving people the confidence or self-awareness to participate in that way. Yeah, I think that's something that's highlighted to me now. Yeah,
I think a good reference for the work that PBL involves in sort of that, I was working on the translation proposal, and it gets so expensive, even in like different currencies, different like Latin American, which is not that expensive. You're talking about like 20 cents a word or something, and it's just it's thousands of words and hours of video just to create the PBL. It's a lot of work that just goes unrecognized most of the time, because it's not just doing it, you also need to communicate it. It's too much.
Yeah. And it's like kind of like, it just relies on an old kind of volunteer and burnout. It's just like, okay, the young people in there that are passionate and want to do it, have like a real desire, and then we just sort of the system sort of pulls that in, uses up that free resource, and then it's just like, okay, there's another person, and in a network like Cardano, then it can build like a bad taste, and it's just like, there's a pitfall there. What sort of reminded me is like, and this may be jumping into solution, because if it's expensive to translate something and you build out a document, it's 1,000 words, you translate it, but then next month it's already out of date and it's sort of useless. I think that's a tension, and then you don't want to invest in building things because you know that it's going to be outdated. So yeah, like that is the, that resource. It's like, oh, I'm going to expend all this resource and then it's outdated. But I feel like we're smart enough to be able to build in a modular way, or what's actually changing. Is it just the, maybe this has to do, folding back on the conversation, soft fork and hard fork, like stuff that breaks backwards compatibility versus things that are just sort of additional and things still work. But it's kind of when there's outdated, and Faizan and I kind of got into this as we were doing the Cardano node. It was kind of interesting to sort of see what changed, and it was learning opportunity. I think, and this is gratitude to the course and the group. Like I felt like I didn't bounce off of it. I was able to like stay in the fight a little bit longer and say, oh, now I learn a little bit about Git revision numbers, or I learn a little bit about, dot files in a Linux system, or user, like all sorts of little things, just because I got into a big, I got lost in the weeds, and like finding my way out was beneficial because I didn't hold my breath and close my eyes and just freak out. I was just like, okay, I know that I've got a big group of people, that have got my back. 11 people here on the call now. That that like if I got into too much trouble, I can just say, okay, let's just try it at the next time. So that's a real benefit. I think.
Roberto, what do you think?
I just wanted to add that on the experience of the academy, the Murgo Academy, what we have done to deal with the constant updating of content it's really annoying. It's kind of like a top to bottom approach. So we start with the things that doesn't change, like the model, and you go from there. There are things that are unavoidable, like I'm going to give you a very recent example. I'm still looking for the latest location of the simple scripting documentation so many links broken. I cannot seem to find it yet. Something extremely silly. But if you're coming from top to bottom to some extent, you can keep the general sense of what is available making sense. And then deal with the iterations of updating the corners, like not cutting corners, but updating whatever is changing, whatever is being updating, whatever changes after a hard fork. Then you can address that on the specifics. So in a lower layer of the pyramid. So that's what serves us to some extent to keep it making sense, because we actually suffer from the V1 to V2 change, to the point that I can give you another real example. I got a virtual machine completely perfectly working for compiling V1 code and V1 project from learners that they have to make a final project on their course. And then after Basil, like a month later, it was broken. I didn't change a thing, but IOG changed something, and something that no longer compiling the incoming projects was a painful. So there are things that are unavoidable like those. But from the content point of view, documentation point of view, if we come from top to bottom, we can deal to manage with it in a way that makes sense. The problem that we have with things all around the place is that there's no top. Not even the developer's portal from IOG. We got like a spread sideways. So when something is broken, it's just missing. And it might be not missing, it might be moved to somewhere else, and then we don't know what it is. And if you cannot find it, then you just lose track of it. And there's so many things happening that unless you have the time and to do the due diligence to look for it, you might consider it lost until you actually find it later when it suddenly is updated again or something of the sort. That's like the common experience. So I think a top to bottom approach might help a lot with this documentation problem.
Thanks, Roberto. Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't really thought about the compiling thing, which from my understanding is, again, the CS50 learning is like going from sort of natural language to pseudocode to code to assembly code to machine code, and those layers of abstraction there can be breaks. So if you build everything and then they change something in the process, then it can go wonky. And then you bring up the distinction between that, the program side, and the documentation side, and that they're both a little bit different.
Yeah, I see it from the point of view of I like to stress more the model, since there's also a reality that we don't know where things are going to be in 5 years.
Yeah.
There's no de facto standard in development in Cardano. That's a fact. We might have current leaders like Plutarch and easy on-ramps like Aiken, but if options get its way around, which I hope it does, it's probably the better tool stack for entry point for non-coders, which is more people than actual professional coders. And it's more accessible for non-developers to learn Python. So what's more important than Python itself, which is easy to learn? The EUTXO model. So align your use case with the blockchain. So I stress more the model than teaching Plutus, which it's still complicated for those who are barely learning Haskell, and they get into Plutus and they're still finding their ropes around. And I'm not myself an advanced Plutus user like the guys on MLabs. I'm still learning from those guys. So basically, stress the model, which is the top-down, bottom approach that I'm describing, so you get how to make it work. And then you choose the tool that is available at the time that you are. So it's right now, it's going to be, I don't know, Aiken. If it's in 5 years, it could be Option. Who knows? Whatever is accessible to you, because if you are a JavaScript developer, you're probably better with Plutus. If you are a Haskell developer, you're going to be better with an advanced Haskell developer at that. You could be better with Plutarch. There are things that you cannot avoid. If you're doing a DEX, you probably have to go with Plutarch. But if you're doing, let's say, take Ada Finance, they were in Plutus and they're migrating to Aiken. Aiken has an easy on-ramp. I consider the language a mess, but it's a really easy on-ramp. Now, Option is Python, a full stack now that there's even PyObvious, but still needs to get to production ready. But we don't know where we're going to be in 2030. I always stress the fact that nobody remembers Viper in Ethereum. You might not even know what it is. But there was an alternative to Solidity. You can Google that up. It's called Viper.
Oh, so you're blowing my mind, Roberto. You're blowing my mind. I'm going to take a little break because you're saying that Solidity, which is like the Aiken of Ethereum, or one of these farther up abstractions. I think I'm tracking. And there's a pitfall or a danger that these sort of fall away and don't get updated or don't get adopted, like Solidity is the adopted and sort of the standard now, but we don't know what happens in 7 years. And in Cardano, with a emergent ecosystem, which one of these tools wins, but it becomes more used. Oh, yeah.
Let's connect this to governance, right? We were just looking at the Cardano CLI governance commands, right? And in the Sancho Net tutorial, it shows us how to put a constitution on chain, right? Now, the way a constitution is going to go on chain is it's going to be the hash of the document itself, so you can confirm it's the right one. And that constitution is by definition hard to ratify. Part of the 1694 conversations are, well, what exactly should the voting threshold for yes, ratify be for a constitution? We don't know exactly what the number is going to land on, but there's general consensus that might be a higher threshold than some less consequential decisions. Okay, so now keep that in mind. Constitution is also not going to change very often. Certain parameters might have to be tweaked more often. And so these are different things, right? The way we are thinking about the constitution of an educational program, to kind of echo Roberto's idea of stressing the model, is through learning targets, okay? Learning targets shouldn't actually change very often. how precisely we help people master those learning targets is going to change all the time.
Right.
The documentation is going to be refined over time. The tools are going to change, right? And Roberto, I agree with you completely. The emphasis on Plutus is a little bit misleading. And that's why this course, we talked about this yesterday, we haven't done a lot of validator development yet, right? Because what we're trying to do is show everybody the context into which the validator fits. And there's so much. You got to understand UTXOs. You got to understand transactions before anything a validator does can really make sense. Now, finally, follow this learning targets as the model or the contract, right? We can all agree to whether or not this set of learning targets is the right one for this course. We can change it if it needs to be changed, right? But at the end of the day, how do we know that that's an effective list of learning targets? Well, everybody here is about to start finding out, right? Some people here are going to go out into the world and say, well, I graduated from PPBL. And people are going to say, so what? And you're going to say, well, I did these learning targets. And they're going to look at that list of learning targets and they're going to say, oh, that's a really good list of things. Okay, so like Gimbal Labs is saying that you mastered these things. All right, join our team, right? Or they'll say, that's the wrong list. That's not good enough. Or they'll say, well, Gimbal Labs is saying you mastered those things, but how do we know, right? And that's where organizational reputation is going to come from. But we're just the first model. And other organizations are going to have other sets of learning targets in the courses they use to onboard people to a layer 2 protocol or to SPO PBL, or the list could go on. And that list of learning targets becomes a contract that people can share across organizations. Take it or leave it. This is the list of learning targets we've covered in our course, right? And that's going to help you send a signal out to the world about who's best to collaborate with, who do you want to spend time collaborating with. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm eager to start, debating whether or not this list of learning targets is right, and to follow kind of this constitutional model for putting a record. We haven't done it yet, but we should have a hash on chain that says these are the learning targets that people worked through in this iteration of the course, so people can validate against that.
I'm sharing my screen of the student learning targets, and I think that just to sort of maybe to sort of sum up that, and to repeat it back, is that the documentation changes, learning changes, but these student learning targets, like Roberto says, like those are the things that don't change as much, and we can focus on those things. The how we get there will change more frequently. And then bringing it into governance, it's like, wouldn't it be great if we decided and ratified or sort of certified and said, these are the learning targets that we want here in August of 2023. And that we know that every year, every period of time, that we come back and revisit these and say, are these the learning targets? And then actually you made a big case. It's like, okay, well, like, how do we verify, and all those type of things. But I think that sums up the why governance to a community, of learners, a school, makes a difference. Yeah. Does that sound like what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah, when I think about like the top to bottom approach, my philosophy is very strongly like those learning targets should be at the top, and they should be governed by a broader and broader community of stakeholders over time, right? If if a course as a community resource is doing its job, you know, there should be more and more people helping decide on what that top level list of what we're trying to accomplish says.
I can plan and implement my own Plutus contracts. Student learning target 302.1. That's going to be sweet. You know what I'm saying? You know, yeah. I'm looking forward. I do think that we have in the room, you know, folks that can make a difference. I feel like I can make a difference, and you're helping me with that. So,
happening. Yeah. It really is. It's really exciting.
Roberto says, and just to be clear, I like Plutus very much, and it's important to learn at least the basics. Yeah, exactly. It was like, yeah, I think that learning, it's like the background knowledge and then how it's done today. Like for instance, we started off with learning just the introduction to computer science, which, I mean, my introduction to computer science happened when I was 12 years old, you know, 50 some odd years ago. Not that long ago, but yeah, you know, like I have a very antiquated thing. I can remember, you know, learning about bits and bytes from a cartoon book, you know, and it's just cool to go back and refresh that. And so we want to look for the headwaters of this stuff, and spend the appropriate time sort of and resource, which is valuable. Speaking of valuable time and resources, I am mindful of the time, so I just I'm going to stop talking.
Appreciate it. So, I mean, my strongest advice, I think, to everybody is whatever smart contract language you like the most right now, don't hold it too dear. You know,
yeah.
Be really open as you investigate each one. Don't write any off either, right? Because this is all gonna evolve as we use these things. But we also have to recognize, and I hope this is coming through in the course, what proportion of application development is actually in the writing of the smart contract itself. Because I think it's a big misconception about how outsized of a role does that play, when really it's a relatively small bit. And if you understand how to read what a pre-built contract is doing, and you understand how to build the transactions and the UI to make those contracts helpful, I think that second part is really going to be where the highest volume of work is in the next few years. Yeah, Roberto, what do you think?
There's usually the confusion because of that focus on Plutus and other languages that on the on-chain validator. But in Cardano, we always have to remember that the smart contract is a two-part set. You have an action that will be the transaction that you define, and you have the rules that validate that action, that it's the on-chain validator part. They go in tandem, they're not independent. I mean, if you design a protocol, you are designing actions that anyone can create with any tool, CLI, Lucid, Mesh, Cardano serialization library, whatever. But it's a two-part system. So it's a two-part set of an actual smart contract situation. So I agree, and I think the focus is too much on the on-chain part, and we tend to forget the importance, the equal importance of the on-chain part for the full transaction experience. And this goes back to understanding the model, which is you take any use case, you align it with the UTXO model that implies transaction definitions on protocol design, and then you include whatever rules you require for that to work the way that you need it to work. So you can align any attacker as another user. So you basically exclude any possibility of somebody trying to funnel your funds, because if they abide to the protocol, they're just another user. So that's a security that we get from the model naturally, which is a Cardano superpower right there.
Mhm.
But I always like to make that enforcement. It's the whole thing. The rest is how you communicate that, which is very important too. We need more focus on the user experience, which is a mess all around the blockchain ecosystem. And Cardano can take an advantage if concentrate on that part, because we got the backend pretty much solved. And that's one point. And the second point, and I'm missing it, it just escaped me the idea. That's something that you were talking about. No, lost it. When I came back, I bring it forward.
That's great, Roberto. See, that's awesome.
It's
The
gone
next
very
week-
quiet.
Oh. Seeing if anybody else has some thoughts. Next week, module 301 will go live. We'll release that on Friday the 1st, and it's kind of perfect timing. Back to school, September hits, and we do start this next wave. But as we've been talking about these last few days, contribution is going to come in many different flavors. Okay, so also in September, we're going to find out if there's some amount of funding for this work. And if there is, I'm really excited to see what that does, right? To motivation, to be part of the course, but also towards building up how we govern these decisions about what a course prioritizes and what new courses are built around. So exciting moments to kind of pick up these ideas. As we move to next week, think about the extent to which you want to bring questions, ongoing questions about the 100 and 200 level modules, and think about if there's any side detours that you want to go on together. Because if we all decide to, we could spend a couple days of live coding looking at SanchoNet, for example, right? We could dedicate some attention to stake pool operation, or building a pool on pre-prod, for example. But all of that depends on what each of us brings. Okay, so think through those questions, think through priorities. Setting those priorities is a tiny act of decision making, right? It's a pathway towards governance, and that's really what we're here to be figuring out together. Is how to create those tools of shared decision making, because Plutus gives us a lot of options, as we'll start to see, for managing who has access to what kind of decision-making power. Any questions before we break for a weekend of hacking?
Hey, I do have and I love that, as setting priority as a small act of decision making, small act of governance. That's huge, and I really want to see us as a community do that together. That's just right on. Is anyone involved with the Cardano Transparency and Governance Hackathon, yeah, I would love to know like what your other projects and focuses are that are going on. I signed up for it. I'm not exactly. I just wanted to see what was going on at this Cardano hackathon.
Could you share the link?
Oh yeah.
With information, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the Cardano Summit one, right?
Yeah. And the winner is, it's like a 10,000K or a 10,000 USD thing. I'm gonna put it in the chat. I think it's started on the 9th. It ends on the 14th of September. Yeah, I see Dan got it.
Yeah, so just a quickie. I was thinking, as we're moving further on through the course, and there will be other people coming up behind us, is it worth having we've got course questions on Discord. Would it make sense to have some sub categories? So we've got questions for the 100 modules, the 200 modules, the 300 modules, rather than them all lumped in together. Would that be helpful? Does anyone think?
Like on the Miro board itself, or are you thinking?
No, on the
elsewhere?
Discord.
On the Discord. Oh, sorry.
On the Discord. I'm thinking we have under PPBL. There's course questions or course questions, something like that. I just wondered if it might be more useful to people if they were broken down into the separate groups.
I definitely think I could get on board with, taking a systematic and approach to managing that. It's basically our classroom, it's basically our school structure, and making it, I feel like me as a junior learner, that we have a responsibility to sort of feedback, and then there's another, commitment to like make it work. And that's a great governance action, because it's not really a big deal. I mean, we can kind of deal with it, but wouldn't it be great if we all came together and built like a sweet ass Discord server?
Love it.
Yeah. So Dan, let's maybe we can chat more, or somehow. I definitely feel it's a tension for sure.
Cool. The other thing is, who keeps an eye on the questions so they get answered? Because I've looked at them on the odd occasion and noticed that there are unanswered questions in there. So I mean, do we want to take us make commitment as a group that we will check in on the questions for anyone coming along with questions to see if we can help? I mean, I'm happy to do it once a day. I don't know if anyone else would be happy to commit to doing that. Just checking the Discord questions once a day and seeing if they can answer them.
And even if one, I love this idea. It's sort of like there is a responsible, like someone making the commitment, taking on the responsibility to just scan, look for questions, and then even if they can't answer them, so that no question gets like crickets. So you're just like, I don't, or maybe air traffic control to say, oh, someone might know this or someone might know that, because the Discord ecosystem is tough, meaning that people may not be getting pinged or notified. It's so if a lot of them just get unanswered because the right people aren't being notified. So if there's somebody there, air traffic controlling, or some type of point guard, for a sports analogy, that can pass the questions on or highlight them, underline them, double click on them to bring people to the right. I think that would be a really cool low. It'd be something that, like, I think a good, like, as a student, as a learner, like I would love for someone to do that for me, and I would love to do that for someone else. Help and be helped.
Thank you. Yeah, that's incredible, and we could use all the help. Yeah,
all right. Well, I'll make a commitment to check them in the UK time zone, and you can maybe check them later on in the day in the US.
Yeah, let's do it.
I just created forums inside the Plutus PBL category, one forum for onboarding and one for BBK, and there's tags inside of each one for each of the associated models. What do you think about that as an experiment? And we can start, using those so we can see kind of module level threads and different question threads.
It could be,
That's cool.
Yeah, let's let me look at that, see if that.
Give it a try. But
have
yeah,
to start somewhere.
eventually there's some really great documentation hidden in some of these Discord channels as well. And so
Yeah.
another really exciting job will be to take some of that best stuff and really start collecting it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that that's, thinking about the community. Yeah. Awesome as always, but I know the time's up. Let's close.
Really fun meta session today. And thanks everybody. If you hear something that's not done, or if you see something that could happen, don't hesitate to bring it up, but also don't hesitate to jump in and just try it. Okay. Just if you don't have the access you need, ask for it. And if you don't have the resources you need, let's keep asking each other and trying to find these things. Cause yeah, this thing can only go to its next steps if a few of us are collaborating on it together. Really appreciate you guys.
Oh,
And see you next week, if not sooner. Thanks, Dan.
Cheers. Bye.
All right. Ciao.
Take care, everybody.